Yeah, no problem.
Okay, and can you see my screen?
We can.
Okay, great. Thanks. So welcome everyone. It's good to have you all, and thanks for joining. I know it's either morning, afternoon, or evening for some people. So today we're going to be talking about data use beyond publication. And quickly, the outline for today is we're just going to do a quick welcome and introduction, and then I'll introduce the first speaker, CK, who will talk for about 10 minutes. And then we'll have about 7 minutes for Q&A and sharing experiences and also lessons around that. And then we'll have our second speaker, Michael, who will talk for 10 minutes also. And we'll have another 7 minutes of Q&A. And then the next time, 11 minutes for Rob, who's going to give us an update about OCDS tools and the roadmap. And then we'll conclude with the remaining time about next steps. During the call, if you're not speaking, remember to put yourself on mute. And if you have any question while somebody's talking, you can type in the chat window. So let us start. When we talk about OCDS and we think about that journey all the way from designing something to solve a problem that we've seen in reality around open contracting, we can see there are 7 different stages that we can think about for a publisher. And most of the time we get to the data publication stage, and then what happens beyond that. So we want to get all the way to the data use, and then that will lead to evaluating what has been done, and then learning and sharing and feeding back into that journey. From looking at our data through rapid reflections, we see that from 2015 to 2018, we have government agencies publishing OCDS data. We have so 2015, 4, and then we have 6 new, and then 7 new, 9 new. And so far from 2015 to 2018, we have 26 new government agencies publishing OCDS data that we know of. When we compare that to publishers who are reporting achieved measurable documented impact, we can see that is not the case. Obviously, we are not expecting impact to be as much as data publication, but can only see in 2016 there is 1 reported case of impact, and then 2 in 2017, and then in 2018 there's none. So we need to do more to encourage data use. And that is what leads to this conversation about how can we, as the open contracting or OCDS community, think about how we can increase data use beyond publication. So that's what this call is about. It is a conversation that is being held with 2 speakers, CK and Michael, who are sharing their experiences, their context. And what I really want to encourage people on this call is to really join in the discussion. This is just 1 hour that we're going to be talking about this, but I also want you to bring in your experiences, and whatever we discuss, we're also going to hopefully take that and use that in ways to think about solving this problem. So with that, I am going to introduce CK. CK is based in Taiwan. He is an entrepreneur amongst many other things, and he also works with an organization called DSP Inc., which is a data and analytics consultancy. He has a lot of experience working with data and analytics, but also in the social goods space. So you may have also seen one of his recent work, which is around follow the money, and we did a blog post about that. But CK has chosen to also share his experience thinking about data use through the topic of data maturity models. So thank you, CK. I'm going to pass this on to you. So give me a second, and I'll pass you the presenter ball.
Thank you, David.
Can everyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you and see your screen.
Okay, good. So today I'm just going to introduce the concept of data maturity model in the context of open contracting. So I'll just break down into two parts. The first part is just in case somebody, some of you may not have heard about the idea or the concepts of data maturity models, and I'll introduce the general purpose and the framework. And then I'll just list some examples in each level of the data maturity model in terms of open contracting. Data maturity model is not a new idea. It has been around like for over a decade, at least in the information technology circles. For example, I show here, for this example, it's a federal government data maturity model from the United States. So they have some kind of levels, and you have to level up from descriptive analytics all the way to predictive analytics. So the purpose of having a data maturity model is three stages. The first one is to assess the current state of your agency's data maturity. And then you can communicate with the data professionals or even with the leadership within your agency. And then the third purpose and the final one is to share your findings, and so you can find the gap or your weakness, so you know you can come up with some solutions to increase your strength in terms of the data maturity model. So following this idea, I just draw a similar data maturity model for open contracting. From the top line, the top row, you can see level. There are 4 levels here, and then for each level, I'll just list a starting point. And then for each level, what are the goals to be achieved? And then if we achieve this goal, what kind of impact should we expect? So the first level, I call it let there be data. So this is, I think most of the people will stay here in this stage because they want to have a procurement system which can generate data regularly. And hopefully this data will come in a standardized format, for example, OCDS. So where should this level start? Of course, it must have some sort of procurement regulations and procedures in place, so we can talk about creating data as a routine. So the goal of this level is to have a standardized reporting of procurement activities. If we achieve this, we can have what kind of impact? I think we can have three levels of impact. The first, we can have a common language here. The common language between all the stakeholders, and then we can have the data transparency. And with this kind of information symmetry, we can start to build trust among stakeholders in the procurement atmosphere. And level 2, I call it compare and contrast. The starting point, the starting point is the goal from the previous level. So once we have a standardized reporting, we can start to do some analysis. The basic one or the most useful one is KPI tracking. With this kind of KPI tracking and compare and contrast, we can benchmark the performance of each suppliers or even buyers. And we can, if we have more data, we can do trend recognition or even anomaly detection, such as we call it the red flags in contracting detection. And the next level is, I call it mix and match. In this level, the goal is to come up with use data for decision support for key initiatives. And this is beyond transparency, beyond anti-corruption. So you can mix procurement data with the other domains data, and so you can mix and match, and then you know how to prioritize your resources or even optimize your resources, and you can one step further, you can just you can run simulations to determine if we put in this kind of public resources, what kind of results should you expect? So, and you can try to find the best solutions for the certain challenges. I will give example later. And the last level I call scaling. In this level, it's just you need to accomplish all the three above levels, and then in this level, just a problem of scale up. And this is a paradigm shift level. So in this level, we can everybody from the frontline workers to commander-in-chief in each organization, they will get used to use data for decision making, and therefore we can create a new culture, a data-driven culture for service innovation and evaluation. So this is what I call a data maturity model for open contracting. Now I'll give some examples. The first one is to create data. For example, I believe most people know this example, the Prozono from Ukraine. It took them 2 years to come up with the e-procurement system. So they can have a system to capture data, to create data. So I call it the level 1. And level 2, once we have this kind of data, we can start to compare performance or activities from each suppliers, from the supplier side or from the buyer side. So this is an example from UK SPAN network. They do this kind of tracking of local government procurement. So similarly, development gateway from the United States, they have this kind of corruption risk dashboard, so they can track anomalies in contracting activities. So they are trying to compare and contrast and find potential fraud or rigging. This is an example from Taiwan. So we have done some analysis, comparing, analyze the buyers and suppliers for the certain government agency. So we can see the social network here. The red dots represent the government agencies within this ministry, and the white dots are the suppliers for each agency. I attached the reference link at the bottom of each slide, so you can read it later. And this example is also compare and contrast. All these nodes represent a company, and they are all bidding in the same award range. In this example, it's a Taiwan dollar from 1 million to 20 million. And we determine that if they have some intimate relationship. In this case, we're using if they bid together 5 times in the past. I think they are closely related in the market. So this is one of the examples for compare contracts. And the next level is the one David just mentioned, follow the water. We compare, when we use open government spending data on flood management compared with the seriousness of flood risk for each certain geographic areas. And then we can come up the 4 corners in this map. So we can see in the first corner, you can see there are a lot of flood and also a lot of government spending, so which makes sense. But in the corner number 4, a lot of floods, but much less spending. So why are they ignored? This is a question we can follow. As well as so this is mix and match level. And the next level is we can have some ad hoc one-time analysis for all the 3 levels, but can we scale and turn this kind of data material into a daily life, a daily operation, just how to make it a standard operation procedure? This is what I call the challenge of scaling. And I have not seen any real-world example for this level, but if you have, I'm looking forward to hear it. Thank you.
All right, thank you, CK. That was very quick and very insightful. So for those of you who just joined the call, we're talking about data use beyond publication, and CK just shared a framework or a model called the data maturity model that helps us really think about all the different stages we can go through to achieve data for impact. So at this point, I'll really leave it open to the people on the call to ask questions for CK if you need deeper insights, or if you also have experiences with something like this, again, towards the point of how does this really help us as the OCDS community achieve data use beyond impact. So let's have some questions.
Hi, CK. It's Ben Frenzy. I'm head of infrastructure at OTP. We met in Seoul last year. Thanks so much for that incredible presentation. It was really interesting. I had two questions for you. On the flood mitigation and flood resource implementation slide. So two questions. The first one is through that analysis that you ran, were you able to come up with any reasons for why there was such a discrepancy in the way that the flood resources were allocated? And second question is, since that data was published, has there been any change or any move towards change to address that disparity?
Okay. This kind of mix and match analysis is basically I think this is a gap analysis, and for the purpose of a gap analysis is to find the weakness in this system, so we can know or anomaly, so we can follow up. So in this project, we have gone through thousands of projects over a period of time. I think it's almost 10 years of data. And so the next step is, I think the next logical step is to look into each project in detail, and then we can come up with more insights, and then we can decide what to do from there on.
Okay. Thanks, CK. Ben, did you have an additional question? Sorry.
No, not an additional question, maybe more of a reflection. So completely take your point, CK, that this was a gap analysis, and that's a starting point for trying to understand where the issues lie. And I'd be really interested to learn more as this work goes forward, because that's really the key part, right? I think it's interesting in itself, but where we'd really love to see is what happens next, and whether the relevant authorities then make a change based on this data and this excellent analysis that you've run. So please do keep us posted and let us know if there's anything that we can do to support.
We have about 4 minutes for questions, so any other person?
Hi, may I go? May I go
yes,
now?
Yes, please do. Please go.
Hello, so my name is Marcela Rosso, and I work at the World Bank. Thank you very much for the presentation. I'm sorry I was in a little bit late, so I might have missed part of the information. So if I'm asking something that you already mentioned, I'm sorry. I wanted to follow up on Ben's question regarding this mix and match analysis, because I agree that's a very interesting feature and much more advanced than what we have achieved in many countries. But my question was who is leading on this? Because I suppose that this is, I don't know if this is work and that has been done from the procurement agency. But the question is, how involved have been the line ministries or the agencies responsible for service delivery or for the projects themselves on being part of this analysis? Because the question is related to how do you build ownership, as you were saying, on the scale-up stage, on those who are actually the ones who are going to have to make the policy decisions regarding allocations of resources or priorities defined in different ways in terms of technical assistance or whatever. So is this something that has been done more from the procurement agency side, or is this something that has been done in collaboration with the other line ministries and agencies? Thank you.
Thank you, Marcela. This project is it's an outside-in project. So it started as a civic hacking project. That was a group of a hack team composite of news media and civic hackers. And once they get their initial results, we shared the results with the water management agencies, because they are the government agency responsible to change the to use this information to improve procurement and budget allocation. Not the and it's not for the agency in charge of procurement regulation. So this is for water management, not for procurement reform. So this is the case in Taiwan.
Okay, and then the follow-up question is how did the water management agencies react? Like what has been their take on this?
Initially, they were shocked to hear about these findings, and then they are very interested in digging into the details. So they invite the team into their agency, and so they start to compare more data sources. For example, because over the 10 years, the mindset about water management has changed in Taiwan, from blockade to prevention to just adapt the environment. So there's a paradigm shift in terms of the strategy and policy. So some of the data results here may be outdated. So they are trying to update the information and do a more up-to-date analysis.
Okay, thanks, CK. There are two questions from Rob and Charlie on the chat. So Rob is asking that he'll be interested to learn more about how you can identify companies. Does the data have really good identifiers, or do you use another data set to help with that? And then Charlie's question is that she'd be interested in whether there's an underlying model for how people, organizations move between the stages of the model. So you showed us the different stages, but is there some way, or is there some recommended best practice or suggestions on how people move between the different stages towards that maturity? So those are the two questions that we have to end with this session.
Okay. The first one is, how do we identify the companies? For each tender, they will list the companies who had bid it and who had won the contract, and then they have the company name and their business registration ID. So use their ID, we can look up in the business registry databases, which is open data in Taiwan. So we can find their unique business ID, and then we can do all the company tracking and comparison. Is it okay for? Did I answer your question?
Yeah, thanks. We've often seen in looking at data from around the world that it's often identifiers that let down the very good analysis that you've been able to do here, and I think could be a barrier to people progressing through these levels in other contexts, that the infrastructure to identify companies and to be able to do those lookups and to be able to get the identifiers for every single company that has bid through open registrations and that kind of thing I think could stop you getting from sort of level 1 to 2, even if there was the will and the ability to move up the maturity levels within a particular publishing organization, or even within across multiple organizations. If identifiers aren't there, we often find that lets down even relatively simple analysis. So it's really encouraging to hear that you've got that as open data, and that's great.
And regarding the second question, how do we label up? I don't have a good answer yet, but I think this is something OCP and us as a community can work on this year to come up with some empowerment solutions for all of us.
Great. Thanks, CK. And again, I like how you're framing that. This is a community discussion, and the model that you've presented allows us to think about where we're trying to go in terms of impact and some kind of pipeline or process or framework to really try to get there. And I think for us as the OC or OCDS community, really thinking about what really works for us, what are the examples and the experiences that we can bring in to develop something that works for the people we're trying to create impact for. So really thank you for sharing that. And we'll continue this discussion and conversation if there's a little bit more time, or if not, we'll continue on the mailing list. So now we're going to move on to our next presenter. Our next presenter is Michael from African Freedom Information Center in Uganda, and he's going to really share with us about how do you really answer or you provide the accountability demand. So Michael, I have passed the presenter ball to you, and so please take it away.
All right. Hello. Hi, everyone. Hello.
Hi, we can hear you, Michael.
I
think most people are on mute, but we can hear you. At least I can hear you, and I believe people can. Charlie said hello.
Myself.
Okay.
Cool. All right. I'll be talking about the accountability demand and really how the consequences of when things are left to go without accountability. What are the real life consequences, and how do you deal with those? As my colleague has shared, OCDS and its realization pretty much has a standardized set of procedures, like where is the data, so you do mapping, and then when you've done the mapping, you come up with these gaps in the current information system, and then when you build the system, you have the system. Now the question is, now that the system is available, what next? You know, and that is the real dilemma we at AFIC find are now currently having to deal with. Now I will give two use cases. I'll probably use 2 minutes to explain 2 use cases here to really drive this point home. The first use case will be how 50 billion Ugandan shillings could have actually saved the lives of 30 people who died sometime last year. Now, to put this into perspective, Lake Victoria itself is actually the largest lake in Africa, and it is the largest tropical lake in the world. Its average depth is about 130 feet, and the lake itself is about 400,000 years old. It has dried up a couple of times. I think the last time the lake dried up entirely was about 17,000 years ago. And all that is besides it being the source of the Nile. Now, in 2017, the government secured around 50 billion shillings from the African Development Bank. Now, the purpose of this money basically was to improve wireless communication on the lake, set up 16 rescue stations around the lake, set up maritime rescue communication center for response to distress calls, locating victims in case of a disaster, and really mobilizing and coordinating rescue missions. Now that was 2017. This did not happen. The money was misallocated. The whole project failed. Now last year, there was a boat cruise with an excess of over 60 people. It was actually overpopulated. That was on the same lake. It capsized and 30 people died. So it raises the question, what could have been done differently to avoid such a disaster? Had there been accountability? And how would you have gone about that accountability? So as we think about that, I'll give you another use case too. About $500,000 was put aside by the government to be used for the construction of a football stadium. But upon investigation, like 2 years after the project, we discovered that that whole money was never used for its purpose. And in fact, the land that was gazetted for the football stadium ended up being a goat grazing field. So in its entirety, we never realized value for that money. And basic things like bills of quantities, how much was paid so far, the contract certificate, things that open contracting actually would have solved had it been there at the time, were the things that were being asked for during the inquiries. So all these and many more led to us thinking that, hey, why don't we even have disclosure tools? We built the government procurement portal, which is, it's called, in Uganda, it's called the GPP. It is where the government usually discloses most of its information, procurement, tender. And this initiative began way before we kind of got to know about open contracting. And with the help of OCP, I believe in 2016, the portal was aligned to the OCDS data standard. Now, this, like most activities in open contracting in Africa here, it's another checkbox. Yes, we did mapping. Yes, we now have the portal. So we've ticked. So you would think that that in itself is end all be all, you know. And we also have now working on a third-party tool called Budeshi Uganda, inspired from our colleagues in Nigeria who have a tool called Budeshi to further analyze this information. Another tool we use here to analyze data is good old Excel. Get information, punch in Excel, and try to make sense out of it. Now, these portals themselves, the government procurement portal basically looks like this, and we have it has its own challenges currently, and luckily we've been working in Uganda on a redesign of this and trying to make it fast and make it present more information in a more meaningful way. And then we also have the Budeshi, which is also another third-party tool that we are trying to use to kind of integrate with the portal to disclose information. Now, it's important to note that disclosure in itself is not it's not enough. It is how we use this information that really counts. Something that we just actually started realizing, because there were questions earlier on in this discussion, like we are publishing, that we do, and also I think David shared the ratio of how many countries have adopted open contracting, and it looks good, but then impact, I think we have only one, and between 2018 and now, I think there is zero. So the question is, how then do we measure impact? Now, what we did realize is that it is one thing to have these disclosure tools like we have them now, but the way you convey this information really matters, because if you have a tool that doesn't communicate, then again, it defeats the purpose. So in that regard, I was actually of the view that just like we have the OCDS, why don't we have a standard that kind of guides on how you disclose and how you display information? The minimum thing that we have. Because one of the challenges, and I'll give an example, is with our portal through user engagement, realize that yes, the community, the CFOs, the business people were saying that in as much as we have a portal, but we can't find things. A builder would probably have to go up to page 3 of 30 to actually now find tenders about construction and work. Yeah. So, and the argument really here is that What if then information is categorized in a particular way, whereby navigation is simple? You know, in the software development world, I think that they've cracked that problem. We have visual representation framework like Bootstrap, things like Angular material. That kind of basically standardize how things lay out and how things look like. So it got me thinking. I think in the open contracting community, in addition to coming up with standards on how data is retrieved and how data is manipulated, we should also come up with standards on how data is represented, you know, because Pozoro is the leading, you know, it's the go-to, and they've done an amazing job. One time we visited it as a source of inspiration, and we just got lost in this sea of information, you know. The terrain of contracting is kind of not flat. We are all at different levels, and sometimes when you overwhelm people and realize that with information, you have the data, but they just don't understand it. So what we decided to do was, in the absence of these tools, because right now, in about 2 or 3 weeks' time, we shall be rolling out a newly redesigned government portal, and also Budeshi, because Budeshi is kind of joined at the hip with the portal through some API. So as long as the portal is not ready, then we cannot have these analysis tools. And this brings the classic case of what do you do then if you don't have if I was to say in quotes, the standard acceptable disclosure methods, because if they say you need to have some sort of government data source and to have some sort of analysis tool, what if you don't have those tools? What do you do? Do you then just sit down? Those are the questions we are grappling with, and these are societal issues, because the technical issues like format of data, which are important, sometimes address things at a more advanced level, you know. Rural areas, people who are deep down in villages are grappling with a far bigger problem than how, you know, which format is this data in. So what we are doing is that we are trying to get this information and then break it down and redesign it, basically, present it in a way that makes sense to the average man. So we speak visually, we use infographics, and we've used this quite a lot. And then we have used engagements. We've used
Michael, you have 1 minute, just a reminder.
Okay. Yeah, we've also done civic engagement, and this actually is where we get feedback, like this portal, or this tool is not really communicating, and how can we improve it? And also we've worked with government. Now, we also realize the challenge that there are so many people in this space who are doing the same thing. So what if we consolidated our efforts? So it's a concerted effort. You work with government to try and disclose. You know, if you leave this to government or and government alone, then again, the impact will not be felt. Reports have also come out. You know, reports are not for the bookshelf. There are so many reports on contract monitoring and things, but if we don't share them through social media, if we don't put them out there, if we don't consolidate all this information in one place where people can easily get them, then again, impact may not be felt, because you only get impact through people knowing and creating awareness. So that is really some of the ways, and I've really highlighted the problems we face and how we are going about them in the absence of tools. There are other ways in which you can actually reach people. So yeah, that is pretty much it. Last but not least, we are also considering looking into hackathons and you know, involving the technical people who can then build maybe third-party ecosystems around the current tool, because right now if it's just the government and CSOs, we may not be fully utilizing what's available. So that is pretty much it on my end.
Thank you, Michael. I really like what you just talked about, because you reminded us of why we do this work as an OCDS community, thinking about impact and with Uganda in terms of accountability on the ground. And you have also reminded us about the users and where they exist and how we get these insights to them so that they can be empowered. So I'll leave this open to people to ask questions to Michael. We have about 4 minutes for this, or share also your experiences in context that you see.
A question from the deputy.
Yes.
Hello? Hello?
Hello.
Go on.
Yes. From 2016 and 2017, Michael mentioned that the 75% of the procurements were done using direct procurement. So how did they come up with that statistics when most of the procurements are not automated in Uganda?
Yes. To answer that question is that we do have, like OCDS, there are types of procuring systems. You could have paper-based, and you could have an electronic system, or you can even have a partially electronic and partially paper-based. So this data is there. It's through entities and through documents. So what we do in addition to just using automated tools is we do on-ground contract monitoring. So we get access to this information and then tabulate it the good old way, Excel and analysis to come up with such statistics, which otherwise would have just been left on the shelves.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Michael, just another quick question from the deputy. Just in terms of OCDS usage, have you had any feedback from procuring entities in terms of how they view the OCDS disclosure of information? Any sort of feedback from that community?
Yes, we have engaged the community on OCDS and what value it really brings to the contracting cycle, and it's really a case of willingness. We've got, in all honesty, mixed reactions because we have this portal that has basic fields and they are required to disclose this information through the portal, but even that in itself is a challenge. It's through hardship that they disclose that. And then we talked about this OCDS and they really appreciate the value, but also on the other hand, they see it as extra work. So it's a case of perception, and really the more engagement we have, the more they appreciate, because even them, they now generate reports at a click of a button. And now they are now starting to see that this is actually giving them insights. And through OCDS, because what we do is, our portal is fully OCDS, at least in the back end. So they are generating these reports because of the OCDS enhancements we added, and they're starting to slowly appreciate what it's bringing. Though there is also that perception of it is a bit of extra work, so much information is being required from them. And baby steps here. We believe we shall get there, but it's baby steps.
We have 1 more minute for a question, or 30 more seconds if there's a question. Okay. All right. Thank you so much, Michael. And just tying this into the bigger conversation, I think what both speakers have really shown us that data publication is a huge step in terms of getting towards open contracting, but that is not what leads us to impact. We need to really do more. We need to really think about the other stages in terms of maturity, and that's what CK really focused on. There are different levels that lead to that maturity in terms of adoption of data for impact. And then what Michael was showing us is, in thinking about different contexts and your end users, how can you really make sure that you're bringing the insights to them in a way that empowers them. So again, I hope this has helped us think about different ways that we can continue this conversation and start thinking about tools, resources that we can build to target these specific users. Just a reminder, there's a link in the chat to the slides, and also after this call, I will share a link to that. But right now, I'm going to pass it on to Rob from the help desk, who's going to give us an update about some OCDS tools we've been building at the help desk and what the roadmap looks like. So, Rob, over to you. Rob, you're on mute if you're speaking. Can anyone hear Rob?
No, I can't hear him.
Oh, Rob's web access frozen. Okay. As we wait for Rob to sort this out, I wonder, do any other people on the call have any thoughts in terms of what has been discussed so far as we wait for Rob to come back on?
I have a question. I
yes.
don't know that. Yeah, I was kind of interested in the infographic you shared earlier, because here at AFIC we also ask ourselves, how do you measure impact of your work? What are the indicators? How do you go about measuring the impact of what we do?
You mean the infographic? Which infographic are you speaking of?
No, the graph you shared about adoption of OCDS across the years from 20. So yeah, so I don't know, how do you measure impact of what you're doing?
Yeah. So for people who are wondering what Michael's asking about, I shared a graph that really shows from our rapid reflections since 2015 until now, which shows the number of new government agencies that are publishing procurement data with OCDS, and then also showing the reported and documented cases of impact. So Michael's question is like, how do you measure that? For us, it's really looking at stories of impact. So whether it's in Paraguay, where it's a story about students and what they are doing to actually lead to more open contracting, or Colombia, where it's a case of better prices for school meals. That's really what it is. So I think the impact is that measurable or that tangible change that open contracting really brings about, and that's what we are measuring or we are reporting. So it's not just publishing data, but it's really, once you publish data, how is that really having an impact on the ground, on people's lives? Okay. I think Rob, are you back? Okay, we still don't have Rob. Anyone else on the team, Charlie, who's able to present? All right. If not, does anyone have any thoughts around Michael's question of how do you measure impact? Or how have you been thinking about impact as members of the open contracting community?
Hi. Speaking from the ZPPA perspective, we have started using the OCDS, and because of the data that we are publishing there, of course the impact is expected. But I want to look at it from the point of view of organizations that have approached us in the usage of the electronic government procurement system that we have done. So I'll give an example of NGOs that are willing to sponsor, for example, the Ministry of Health, okay, trying to assist them in several aspects of their operations. They look at this data and use it to determine what kind of activities can they help in. using the same data, they are able now to fine tune and look at where do they need the help more. Is it to access, to provide medical access to remote areas? What type of access can they use? Because this information as it going, there are several types of procurement. We will bring out, when you analyze this data, will bring out several aspects in terms of their operations and the efficiency of the operations of these organizations. So the information, the more is there, the more it is useful, and the higher the impact it will be in terms of service delivery to the government at large and suppliers and procurement entities as well. Because when you analyze this data and you make very good use of it, you fine tune, you scale up. So it also comes back to the question of someone mentioned about leveling up the usage of the tools as they come up. I think that's the where we are looking at, and we're very much looking forward to seeing more of our data being used by other people as we put it out there. But we are just getting started as well. But this is what we expect to see anyway.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And Lindsay also said, so for OCP, we define impact as measurable improvement in procurement outcomes that result from data usage and engagement. So I hope that really also provides some context in terms of that. So I think Rob is back. Rob, can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. So take it away.
And can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. Yes, as soon as I clicked the present button, all of the interface for WebEx disappeared. So that helps. Cool. So at the OCDS Help Desk, we create a number of tools that we use internally and are available for the community to use, and we hope they're helpful. And we invite people to tell us how we're doing with them, how if they're useful, and give feedback on features. I've linked to this presentation from the main one, and I'll put some GitHub links into this when I'm done for the issue trackers and so on. There's three things we've been working on recently. Kingfisher, which is our platform for obtaining, storing, and analyzing OCDS data, and data review tool. David, you asked me to talk about tools directory. I don't actually know about that. I'm hoping Charlie does and can talk about that in a little bit. So Kingfisher is something that we started building about a year ago, and it's a collection of tools for getting hold of OCDS data from lots of different places. If you've told OCP where you're publishing data, we probably have a scraper for it, and we're probably downloading it occasionally for to help us understand what kind of database, what kind of data is out there. We've rewritten it since last year, and we've now separated it into a bunch of different components, all of which can be used independently or stuck together to create this pipeline of what would, in other contexts, be called an ETL pipeline. ETL doesn't quite fit onto what we do, so we don't call that, but it's that kind of thing. And there's a link there to the documentation. We're still working on it. It's our current focus. The development team working on it right now, but it's already in use. And any new publishers that we're helping to understand their data quality right now, we're using Kingfisher to do that. There's 5 components to it. Kingfisher Scrape is built on the open source Scrapey framework, and that is completely standalone. If you're in a context where you're trying to get hold of all the data published by one or more publishers, Kingfisher Scrape will download it to disk, or it will send it to the API of Kingfisher Process, which is mostly about storage. It uses Postgres at the back end to store data. And Kingfisher Analyze is a collection of tools to help work with OCDS data, including things that you'll already know about, things like OCDS Kit and Flatten Tool, all sit within Kingfisher Analyze. Kingfisher Views is a set of Postgres views to give kind of management information or insights into data that's being published. We use it to help reflect back to people who are publishing OCDS data, to give them insights into what it is that they're publishing, how it could be improved, what the quality is like, what the coverage is like, all that kind of thing. It could also be used for in a civil society context to advocate for better quality data, and it's being actively improved right now to be even more useful. So if anyone's in that kind of context, it would be really interesting to try that out with you. Kingfisher Archive is just a mechanism for moving files around. When you download all the OCDS data that we know about, there's quite a lot of it, it turns out, and an efficient way of storing that is a problem that we had and we've solved, and if other people have that problem, you're more than welcome to use our solution to it. The data review tool, known as the OCDS validator until last summer, has had some work on it over the last few months. Crucially, it's now available as a library. This has come out of the Kingfisher work. We've always tried to make it slightly reusable. It's now even more reusable, and as time goes on, we're exposing more and more of the functions that you'll see in the data review tool as a nice Python library that gives you that results in a way that you can just use straight away. One of the links with Kingfisher is that Kingfisher carries out checks on the data, such as schema validation, data quality, additional fields, coverage, and stores all that in the database alongside the data. So you can then use SQL to query and build up dashboards and so on top of that. We've added some features to make spreadsheets that you make out of OCDS data as the JSON a bit nicer. Previously, if you flattened OCDS data, even if it didn't include particular components, then it wouldn't. Then you get a blank sheet. That is no longer the case. So you don't get the entirety of the standards flattened every time, just the bits used by the data that you're working with. And we've added OCDS show into the bottom of this review tool. So if you upload some data now and scroll down to the bottom of the results page, you get a nice visualization of what that data is, and explore a little bit. This is something that we've wanted to do for a very long time, and we think part of how we provide feedback to people on data is to show it back to them in a different form. And while this is still a presentation of the OCDS data, we'd hope that if somebody could look at this and say, well, hang on a sec, this data isn't actually about time cycle lane improvements, where does that come from? Then, or that date's completely wrong, we did that work 5 years before that, then that's the kind of thing that they might not see if they just looked at the JSON, but would see when it's visualized back to them. And tools directory. I can't mute or anything. Charlie,
hello.
Do you got anything to tell us about the tools directory?
So just to build on that, so you've showcased some tools that we've built internally, but we also have a directory of all of the tools that create, use, visualize, and analyze open contracting data. So I've put a link in the chat. So if anyone's using any more tools that we should know about and we should put in there, please let us know. And we're also really keen to find out what tools work for what purposes. So please let us have your feedback on that.
Thanks. And finally, coming up over the next few months, we've got 2 sprints on the data review tool planned for April, which we're largely just going to be working through the issue tracker for the data review tool. So if that's the tool that you use, either online or in your own work, and there's things that you'd like to see changed about it, get GitHub issues in now, and they can go on the list. No promises, it's already a very long list, but it'd be great to hear how people are using that and if people are coming across any problems with it. We're doing a load of work over the next few months on improving the Kingfisher queries in particular. We're really hopeful that by sharing the queries and some of the analysis that we do as part of the publisher feedback that we offer, we'll be able to provide tools that people can use to hold publishers, governments to account in their own context, and to understand the data that's being published around them, and help people to understand data that's out there that they've come across and has been told might be useful. We can help quantify that. And again, that's something that we're keen to hear from people on. If you're already writing queries to understand the quality or the usefulness of data that is available in your context, we'd like to know what it is that makes it useful. What kind of things do you look for? And then finally, one issue that the Latin American team, ILDA, have found is that people don't people struggle with the first step of you've got some data, it's too big a data set to work with directly, but you still want to get the kind of feedback that you get from the data review tool. So tools to slice up big files into small files, stick lots of small files that have been published by an API together into one big file to do the cross-matching, the manipulation of JSON and specifically OCDS JSON at moderate scale. The tools for that already exist, but they're only command line tools, and they'll only work on Linux in most cases. Most people who work with data aren't set up for that. So making a nice UI to do that for them should take out a barrier on the way. So you should see that coming in the next few months. That's me. I haven't got a button else to stop on sharing my screen. So if someone could stop me being presenter, that'd be amazing.
Right. Thank you so much, Rob. And I am noticing that the time is 9, and I promised to get you out of here by 9. So I'm just going to recap. If you have to drop off, thank you for joining the call. But just to really summarize, we talked about data use, and from CK sharing about the data maturity model, and Michael also sharing about the experience at AFIC, thinking about the users and the context in which they exist. And as you can see from what Rob and Charlie just shared, at the help desk, we're also thinking about tools that can really make data use much easier and streamlined. And so as you experience things, as you work with people on the ground, let us know what you're experiencing and if there are tools that we can build to make that work much easier. We will love your feedback, so I've put a link to the feedback form that you should complete if you can. I'll also share more information on the discussion group. So what's next? Really join the discussion. I'll start a discussion around this to see what other people who couldn't join the call think. Put some issues on the GitHub. And also send us something, send us questions to data@opencontracting.org on what you're working on, questions that you have, and we'll keep the conversation going. So really thank you, everyone. This has been a good call, I hope, at least for me, to really hear what everybody is thinking about and lessons that you're learning around data use. And I hope this discussion can continue beyond that. So with that, thank you, and talk to you on the mailing list and next time. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, David. Bye now.
Bye.